The 23rd of October, the Terminator returned to the big screen in Terminator Dark Fate, with Linda Hamilton back in the lead role as Sarah Connor. Fans were intrigued when it was announced, as James Cameron now had the rights to the franchise he created, but Cameron wouldn't be directing and instead be working as a producer and would have input into its story, as he was focusing on 4 sequels to Avatar, so he left the directing duties in the hands of Tim Miller, who had success with Deadpool. Tim and James said this film would ignore the events of the sequels and would just be a direct follow-up to Terminator 2. Produced for a large budget of nearly $200 million, the filmmakers pushed the notion that it would return to the mature violence of the first 2 films with an R rating, or say 15 in the UK. So for once, this sequel would not be so kid-friendly. The early trailers didn't leave many people impressed, sadly. Very lackluster reactions, and the posters left a lot to be desired. So the hype for this movie has been very tepid. So before I discuss my thoughts on the film, where do we find Sarah Connor after all these years? Set in present day, we see the arrival of 2 visitors from the future. One an augmented human who has super strength and speed, and a full-on Terminator which has the ability to copy anyone, very much like the T-1000 from T2, but also can make a double to outnumber whomever it attacks. As the future is not set, the ultimate war between mankind and machine is still going to happen. Sarah Connor has been hunting down Terminators for the past 2 decades, as they have kept coming through time to change the future. The new target is Danny, and Grace has been ordered to protect her. Sarah joins them but is confused why Danny is so vital to the future. Skynet in the past sent through a number of Terminators back through time. One still remains and has grown old, and has fitted into society, but knows his fate as Sarah comes calling. Now, with this being the 6th film in the long-running franchise, we haven't had much luck with quality sequels to Terminator 2. The first 2 James Cameron films are classics and are important movies of cinema history. What we've seen with Terminator 3, Salvation and Genesis is their attempts to continue this storyline when ultimately it was nicely tied up and finished with T2. But you know, there are always ways to produce more stories, and what we saw was that Judgment Day couldn't be stopped, it was only delayed. Which is fine, I suppose, but we haven't had any sequels to rival the first 2 in quality, and they just often repeat what we've seen before. Fights in factories, car chases, and all the new Terminators are just an updated version of the T-1000. It's just been a repeat of the same formula. Salvation, to give it credit, tried to do something different, and I honestly like parts of that film. I think it starts out very well, but sadly has a clunky third act as it tries to cram in too much, and Skynet's ultimate plan is a bit crap. Genesis tried to pander to fans by using time travel to revisit classic moments from the Terminator, and just went too far with the time travel premise, ending up doing more damage to the franchise than anyone could have imagined. So with the franchise back in the hands of James Cameron, has he influenced this film to get this series out of the toilet? Yes, but only a little bit. I didn't walk out of this film annoyed and upset like I did with Genesis. Dark Fate is okay. It's not going to win any awards or set new ground for the franchise. It's just an entertaining action-adventure film. This is not a James Cameron movie, you have to remember. He has a story credit shared with 4 other writers. This is Tim Miller's movie, and does he provide anything new? Well, not really. It is basically Terminator 1 and 2 mashed together with some ideas pinched from Salvation and Genesis. The future war, for example, looks like the one from Terminator 4. We still don't get that future that we saw in Terminator 1 and 2. It's all grey and had the colours zapped from it, which is disappointing. Despite the issues with the scripts of Terminator 3, 4 and 5, they all have competent action scenes. They are shot by well-seasoned second unit directors, but to make those scenes work you have to be invested in the story. With Dark Fate, I felt somewhat engaged in its journey. Unlike the previous entry, which is a plus, this is due to the characters. With the cast, the performances are very good all round. Mackenzie Davis does a surprisingly good job with the part of Grace. She holds her own in the action scenes and delivers the emotional beats quite well. The trailers gave me this impression she would be quite an annoying character, but I didn't mind her at all. She is essentially playing the role of Reese. She has to persuade Danny to believe in her mission and explains this dark future. Linda Hamilton is the obvious highlight. She plays this tough, grumpy woman very well, and has clearly worked out to get in shape for this role. It's clear the franchise was missing her presence. She was so fundamental to this whole story. With them just focusing on the Terminator and John Connor, it lost some of the magic, and I'm happy she's back in it. But it's not her story really. As she takes a step back as the story unfolds, it shifts to focus on Danny and Grace. But saying that, Sarah does have an interesting arc in the plot. Natalia Reyes as Dani is fine, but the problem with her character is how she ties into the future. It's all a bit lazily done and feels like a rushed attempt to make her this important person to save humanity. I felt her character was underwritten. Arnold Schwarzenegger is back as an old Terminator, and to him this role is second nature. He knows how to become this machine and does provide little bits of humour, but his backstory and what he's been up to all these years was quite amusing for all the wrong reasons, so I don't know how well that will go down with the fans. The new Terminator, played by Gabriel Luna, doesn't have the screen presence of Arnold and Robert Patrick. He just has to look emotionless and tough, which he does quite well, but he doesn't interact as well as the T-1000 with other people when he has to talk. It's like he hasn't been given much direction by the director, other than just play a Terminator, and that's his only guidance. When I interviewed Brad Fiedel for my documentary In Search of the Last Action Heroes, I did ask him if he was going to return to the series to compose the score, as his friend James Cameron now had the rights. But sadly he was never asked, and if he was going to do it, it would only be as a consultant. He has retired from the industry and moved on, and going back into that world, he would have to learn a lot of new techniques as technology has changed. So in his place we have Junkie XL, who worked on Mad Max Fury Road, Batman vs Superman and Deadpool. The composer brings over the Terminator theme, of course, and uses a cue from Terminator 2, which when you hear it you will instantly know what it is, and it appears just copy and pasted from Brad Fiedel's score. The rest of the music was sadly forgettable. There was nothing there that left an impression. It was just your typical modern action score that I would class as wallpaper sound, your usual Hans Zimmer style whams and repetitive cues you've heard hundreds of times before. The visual effects are to the standard of what you come to expect from your usual big budget blockbusters. It does use a lot of CGI. There are some good in-camera stunts for the car chase, but the majority of it relies on computer animation. Some of it holds up well, as it was produced by some of the big FX houses in the industry, but in the finale there is clearly some reshoots and the effects don't seem as well polished. I do believe some of the effects shown in the early trailers have been improved upon. The look of the film is a bit bland, sadly. They make use of a muddy brown and orange colour palette, and it just lacks the flair of Cameron's original work. A lot of grading has been done during the nighttime scenes, and it was often hard to see what's going on. The Terminator films often have action scenes set at night, but never once did you struggle to see what's going on in, say, Terminator 1 and 2 for example. But with this one there was a few moments you can't see what's happening. There has already been some reviews claiming it's the best sequel after Terminator 2. Well, to be honest, I would put it on par with Terminator Salvation. It's better than 3 and 5. Genesis set the bar so low the filmmakers only had to deliver something that was a bit better, and they did. It's hard to know if I will still share the same opinions on this film in a year's time. I recall friends who enjoyed Terminator 3 when that came out, and then a couple of years later they hated it. But my initial feelings at this time is that it's not that bad. I feared it would be a mess, but it holds some restraint and doesn't go too far with things and plays it pretty seriously, with some elements of humour thrown in. It's a 3 out of 5 movie. Overall, it has some interesting elements and good performances, but doesn't do anything spectacular or break new ground. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe to see more retrospectives and commentaries. Also click on the bell to be notified of the latest reviews. If you want access to exclusive videos and to watch my content a few days before it's on YouTube, you can head on over to my Patreon. Thank you very much.